Welcome to our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. So this webinar is all about qualifying work experience, QWE, and we're pleased to have two speakers with us today. We've got Susan from Accutrainee and Giles from the college, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit more in a moment. The webinar should take about an hour. It's open to anyone who's interested in hearing more about qualifying work experience. So we think we have on here students, welcome, paralegals, qualified lawyers. You're all very welcome. Shouldn't take, as I said, any longer than an hour, but please do add any questions that you have for the panelists on the chat bar, which you can find on the right-hand side. We're very keen to take questions and we'll take them throughout. So I'm going to hand you over to Susan, who's just going to do a little bit of an introduction and then over to Giles. Susan.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Cooper. I'm the founder of Accutrainee and AccuFlex. I started my career as a banking solicitor, having trained and practiced at Hogan Lovells, then went on and did an MBA and founded Accutrainee just over 10 years ago now. That's me. Giles, over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everybody. My background's also in practice, as with Susan, and then I've worked in postgraduate legal education for over 20 years now. I've run a number of postgraduate law schools. I've worked with law firms in terms of designing training. I suppose one point that might be of interest for today is when I was leading Kaplan Law School, I led the team that worked with the SRA to design what has become the SQA assessment regime. So hopefully a few useful insights on how that interplays with the new qualifying work experience regime as well. So what we'll do today, if I may start, is just take you through what we're going to cover in this webinar. We're going to very briefly just put QWE in the context of the SQE route to qualification, and then we're going to take you through the various facets and aspects of qualifying work experience. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions, both during the presentation at various times and also at the end. So first of all, Susan and I will just introduce our respective organisations for you. You may or may not have heard of Accutrainee in the College of Legal Practice. So I'll go first in terms of who the college are. We're effectively an accredited, fully virtual postgraduate law school. What does that mean is we can offer up to master's qualifications. We're effectively a higher education provider. But we have a number of drivers that shape our course offering and our approach in this particular way of training. We really are standing for accessible and affordable legal education. That's very much what the SRA intended when they shaped this new training regime with SQE and qualifying work experience. We want to facilitate increased access to profession. That's very important to all of us at the college. And therefore, that removal of the training contract and its replacement by qualifying work experience is quite a significant moment, we hope, in helping more people access the profession. Of course, every individual has their potential, which we really focus on in terms of our courses with personalised and targeted individual support. So especially in this new regime where everyone's a little bit uncertain about what the exam structure looks like, what qualifying work experience actually means and is. So actually working with individuals in a very sort of collegiate approach, we think is the right way to both work with our students, but also to help explain this new regime a little bit better. So Susan, over to you.
Thank you. So just a very quick slide really on who we are, who is Accutrainee and what do we do? We're a tech-enabled flexible resourcing provider, bit of a mouthful there, but essentially what we do is identify and place paralegals, trainee solicitors, as well as qualified lawyers into different roles within law firms and in-house legal teams. We work with a very broad range of different clients. So our law firms could be top 10 city law firms, right the way down to sole practitioners even. And our in-house legal teams that we work with could be FTSE 100 organizations, and all the way to the other side of the spectrum with maybe working with startups. Now, we consider ourselves as the pioneers in qualifying work experience. And the reason for that is because we introduced an innovative new model to the legal industry 10 years ago now. And that model that we introduced, I think hopefully as Giles goes through qualifying work experience in a bit more detail in a moment, you'll see has an awful lot of similarity to what we've been doing in the industry and in the profession for the last 10 years. Essentially, when we joined, we became the only non-legal service provider that's registered by the SRA to offer training contracts. And so we give our trainees training contracts and qualifying work experience. But instead of, as was usually the case, where you might come to an organisation and work there for the whole 2 years, we bring people in so that we can send them out to typically up to 4 different organisations during their training contract qualifying work experience period, so that they can gain the experience that they need. So you can see there's quite a lot of similarities, and we've gained a lot of expertise in helping grow and develop junior talent in this way. Our aim is absolutely to become your partner-in-law during the very early years of your career, so that we can help and support in every way we can in every step of your early career. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Well, we're now going to carry on, ladies and gentlemen, in the first part of the presentation, just to have a little brief overview, first of all, of the new regime and how it operates. And I'm not going to spend long on this because I think everyone who is on the call will be aware of the new SQE route. I think it's key to hold in mind those 4 elements for qualification to succeed in the new regime. First of all, you have to pass these exams, both SQE1 and SQE2, which are obviously run by Kaplan as the assessment organisation for the SRA. You also need a degree, and that can be a law degree or non-law degree or qualification or experience that's equivalent to a degree. And the SRA have various ways of measuring that if you have equivalent experience. You also have to pass the SRA's character and suitability requirements. But the final element, which we're going to major on today, is, of course, completing this 2 years full-time or equivalent qualifying work experience or qualifying QWE. So with bearing those 4 elements in mind, I think it's also worthwhile noting that there is real flexibility here in the regime and what you can do and when. And I think it helps us to just highlight quickly how SQE and the taking of the examinations relate to qualifying work experience. I'll do that in the next couple of slides for you. So first of all, some individual points. SQE1 and SQE2 are separate examinations. I'm going to look a little bit more closely at them in a moment. So there's no need to take them together. You must pass SQE1 before you take SQE2 examination, and you have 6 years to pass both exams for that element of your qualification. The great thing, of course, is that qualifying work experience is flexible and can be done at any time. It can be done before you take these examinations, while you are taking these examinations, or indeed after you've taken the exams, you can start your period of qualifying work experience. And we'll go into much more detail about that, what that actually means. Before I do go on to qualifying work experience, however, let's just remind ourselves of the key facts around SQE. And I think what I'd just like to remind you is that SQE1 is the knowledge component of the SQE exams. That's what the SRA refer to as the functional legal knowledge that you have to cover to become, when passing the exam, a day 1 solicitor. And it's worth noting that's a very wide syllabus coverage. It takes in what you would study in a law degree and also what you would have studied on the LPC in terms of law and practice, and also a little bit of what you would have studied on the professional skills course when you're actually qualified under the old regime. Whereas SQE2 is a skills component, but has a law background. So SQE2 is 50% law and 50% skills. Now, a couple of other things to note are that SQE1 is examined totally online. SQE2 mostly, in other words, 4 of the 6 papers, the written papers, are done online. For SQE2, interviewing and advocacy are examined face-to-face. So SQE1 and most of the elements of SQE2 can be taken at the Pearson VUE centres, and most of the online components of SQE2 are also taken there, obviously. 2 more details for you. There are fixed assessment windows at the moment, 2 for SQE1, January and July, and 4 for SQE2, so a little bit more flexible as to when you can take SQE2. And there's also note that there are exam fees, a charge per sitting. That's separate from any course fee you might pay. Those exam fees are payable directly to Kaplan each time you wish to sit the examinations. So that's just a whistle-stop reminder of the key elements of SQE1, the examination element. Let's move into the main subject of our talk today and just introduce to you this idea of qualifying work experience. And Susan's going to go in a moment into much more detail over how it's approached and also what you really need to think about in terms of the really good aspects of getting very good qualifying work experience. But first of all, I'll answer some basic questions. So what is qualifying work experience? Well, it's experience of providing legal services in a real life environment where a candidate yourself does actual legal services work. And we'll examine what types of work that might be on our next slide. Also, that experience, when you're doing it and completing it, must provide a candidate with the opportunities to develop some or all of some competencies. And those competencies are set out in the Statement of Solicitor Competence drafted by the SRA. So once you've identified what qualifying work experience is and how it's measured against those competencies, I suppose the second question for me is always, who signs it off for you? Well, it's signed off by someone in your place of work. So that can be in a law firm, a compliance officer, or a qualified solicitor who's supervising you. However, there is more flexibility, and it can be signed off from someone outside your organisation, providing they're a solicitor qualified in England and Wales, and providing they gain what the SRA say is direct knowledge of your work. So again, it may be that they talk to your supervisor in the organisation or see the work that you're doing. So again, something there in firms about what's the structure of supervision, how does that work in terms of signing qualifying work experience off. And I suppose the final point to make is what is actually being confirmed, because this is an interesting point that the SRA have made. It is being confirmed that the length of work experience claimed has been carried out. Also, what's being confirmed by someone who signs off qualifying work experience was that experience provided the opportunity to develop some or all of those prescribed competencies I've talked about. And also what the person's signing off is that no issues arose during the work experience that raised questions over the suitability of the person doing the experience to have admission as a solicitor. What is not being confirmed is the quality of the work done. That is not within the ambit of what is being confirmed. It's all about confirming the work has been done and it met some or all of the prescribed competencies. It's not about the quality of the work being done. It's worth pointing out, as we have in the second part of the slide, that this flexibility is a real marker compared to, for example, the old training contract under the LPC. You can take, as I mentioned earlier, those SQE assessments alongside qualifying work experience. There's very little prescription on particular areas of law you need to cover during your qualifying work experience. You may already have accrued qualifying work experience, which can effectively be banked. In other words, previous work you've done as a paralegal or in an organisation may well be QWE, which can be signed off. And then if you've already got that, it would remain for you to satisfy the other three elements, as we've talked about earlier. Now, I mentioned about, well, what sort of things can be QWE? We're always asked this question quite rightly in webinars we present. So we just highlighted really sort of flexibility. You know, we always used to think of under the LPC that you'd get a training contract with a law firm, to use the phrase loosely. But you can see there are various organisations you can now work in that, of course, do legal work. And we've known this all along, that that sort of work, those tasks we've highlighted in the middle of the slide around document review, contract review, legal research, client communication, they're all very important, all very much carried out also, can be in different roles, whether it's as volunteer, an intern, a paralegal, legal assistant, whatever it's called. So I think the key thing is those sort of tasks being carried out would count as qualifying work experience because they're meeting one or more of the competencies in the Statement of Solicitor Competence. So that's really a brief introduction to, I think, some key questions around qualifying work experience. Very happy at this moment just to pause there and say, ask Alice if we have any questions for Susan or myself so far.
Hi, Giles. We do have a few questions. A couple of people submitted that might be timely just to mention now. Yep. So one of the questions was if someone was working at Citizens Advice Bureau, whether that work and what capacity of work would count as qualifying work experience.
And again, I think the Citizens Advice Bureau, given that you're giving often advice around legal issues, you would obviously look at the Statement of Solicitor Competence and what competencies have been met, but certainly the CAB is one of the organisations that I'm aware of that has been effectively giving students, in particular, qualifying work experience.
Thank you. Another one about foreign qualified lawyers.
Yeah.
And I think they've asked about understanding exceptions and conditions and requirements. They don't specify whether that's regarding QWE or SQE, though.
I think that the safest port of call for that is to go directly to the SRA and raise that query with them. The reason being the SRA are looking at different jurisdictions around the world at the moment and creating an exemption system. So depending on where you have qualified in which jurisdiction, there may, for example, be an exemption that's commonly from SQE2, from the skills element, because you've been practicing as a lawyer already, but there may still be a requirement, for example, in the examinations to take SQE1.
Thank you. I've just popped in the chat a couple of resources. So there's the Statement of Solicitors Competence link and also the link to the exemptions. And the last question for now, I think, is what should I do if I want to study law in America?
Well, if you're studying law in America, they will run a degree, usually called a JD, and you would study and apply as the university requires, whichever establishment it was you were going to. And then if you decided you want to practice in America, then you'd obviously look to see which state you wish to qualify for the bar. The most popular one everyone knows of is the New York bar. Indeed, the SQE was certainly modelled in some ways on the New York bar exams, but also the Californian bar. So it's really a case of applying particularly to that university and meeting their particular entrance requirements, whether it's in America or indeed in Canada as well.
Thank you. I think that's all for now, but do add to the chat bar as we go through the next section. Thanks very much, Giles. Susan, if you want to take over now and tell us a little bit more about qualifying work experience.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So I think when we have the slides, the first thing we're going to look at are what are some of the opportunities that are available through qualifying work experience. I guess one of the real big ones is the removal of the dependency on having to secure a training contract. And obviously that's a really significant one because that was often a stumbling block for many candidates wanting to qualify. So there's that removal, and that's an opportunity of going down the SQE route. You don't need to be tied to an organisation for the full 2-year period. I would stress, that is absolutely true for SQE, but obviously with Accutrainee, that's very much what we've been offering our trainees for a while now. And of course, when you're looking at the different types of work experience you may get, you may have opportunities to work in different organisations. The benefits of that is that it can expose you to lots of different, not just practice areas, but also working environments, cultures, different working styles, and that can be very useful. Or alternatively, you can really hone in, you can really specialise and complete all of your qualifying work experience in one particular area of law within even one organisation. And obviously, the thing that I think would be useful to stress there is that would only really be recommended is if you're absolutely certain and you're very, very clear of the direction you want to go into post-qualification, because otherwise that will certainly, I think, restrict you after qualification. You may, as Giles mentioned, you may have already had some QWE under your belt, because as Giles said, it can happen before, during or after doing the SQE exams. So looking at your previous experiences, we've already talked about the CAB, looking at things that you've done, you might want to consider whether some of that or all of that time can be used towards your qualifying work experience period. And of course, if you haven't started looking at SQE prep courses or exams, you could still even be starting to gain qualifying work experience from now, even somewhat surprisingly, in my opinion, anywhere in the world, actually. So, there is a lot more flexibility around how you can gain that qualifying work experience. As I go through the slides, the last 2 points there, I think they do come with some warnings and some caveats, which I'll just go into in a moment. Thanks, Alice. So now we're going to look at how do you actually record and confirm your qualifying work experience. So as you get these pockets of work experience, in order for them to be banked, as it were, towards your qualification, you need to get them confirmed by either the person that was working with you the most during your work experience, providing they are a solicitor or a culp within a law firm, or someone externally, and actually get that time registered. And it's a fairly straightforward, easy process, actually. But if you want to start looking at what types of work will count as qualifying work experience, what I'd strongly advise is that before starting a role, perhaps it's a paralegal role, perhaps it's working in a legal clinic or volunteering work, have really clear, detailed discussions with the organisation at the outset about the type of work that you'll be getting, the kind of experience that you'll get. And it's always a good idea. It may sound obvious, but when you've finished a role, try and get that that work experience confirmed and banked with the SRA under your SRA account as soon as possible. So if you perhaps have finished a 3-month paralegal role over the summer, don't leave it until after maybe you've completed some of your exams and it's sort of 12, 18 months down the road, because the person you were relying on to confirm that time, they may have moved organizations, they may have had lots going on and not remember so clearly exactly what you did with them. It's always good to try and get that all signed off as soon as possible after your experience. There is an awful lot of guidance on the SRA website around this, so I would certainly say that's a good area of information, albeit it can be a little bit contradicting at times, and it has just a little bit of a minefield to work your way around. But there's certainly a lot of information there through the SRA. The next point is, I would say, is very much a backup. There is a recommendation, although not a strict requirement, to actually record your time, or record what you're doing during your qualifying work experience. A lot of organizations, Accutrainee included through our Pathways platform, which I'll talk about in a moment, are offering essentially tools so that trainees can record the types of work, the tasks that they're being asked to do, the skills that they're gaining as they're going through the qualifying work experience. Now, this was a strict requirement under the old sort of period of recognised training, or the training contract route. You had to have a training portfolio. The SRA is still very much recommending that. And I would certainly say, for your own purposes, becomes a very valuable tool for you to look back and almost remind yourself of all the things that you've done, so that as you're going into interviews for jobs, you've got a very good sort of a portfolio, for want of a better word, of all the work that you've been doing. So if the organization you're working with doesn't offer anything like that, or perhaps some of the tools that are available online don't suit you, then the SRA do have quite a simple template that you can also use. You need to set up an SQE account. There's the account that you need to set up to actually sit the SQE exams, but also setting up a My SRA account will allow you to actually register your QWE experience. And as I mentioned, there is an AI platform, a Pathways platform that we've developed that I'll talk about in just a moment. But that's certainly a big part of that, is giving you the ability to record the work that you've done, so that you can discuss that with your supervisor or whoever is confirming your QWE, to give them comfort in the work that you've done, so that they can go ahead and confirm your time. And finally, College of Legal Practice has a QWE hub, and certainly that will also give more information to you and your employers for guidance. Excuse me. So, having sort of talked a little bit about the opportunities and how you might go about recording and securing the recording QWE, I'm going to look at how you go about actually securing qualifying work experience. Now, providing you're not going down one of the routes like Silex or an apprenticeship, providing you're sort of going down what we call maybe the more traditional route, I see that there's really 3 main options that are available. The first is, to some extent, business as usual. You would look at different law firms or in-house legal teams that are offering training programs to see which ones you are most interested in. You'd make applications in the same way as you would with a training contract, and go through a selection process. And if you're selected, obviously you would then that organisation would help you get to qualification. The thing to stress here, I think, is that it's really useful to investigate and research those organisations earlier on, because what we are seeing is that different law firms and in-house teams are putting together different types of programs. So you may get a law firm whose program runs by getting you to complete all your SQE1 and SQE2 exams first before you've even stepped foot in the office, and then do the whole of your QWE in one 24-month chunk. It may be that they ask you to do part 1 first, and then do some or all of your QWE, and then do part 2. So there'll be variations. For example, there's one of the big 4 accountancy firms. They have a 3-year program that mixes in both the part 1, part 2, and the QWE together. So it's really useful to research that, so you've got a good idea of what it is they're planning for you. The second option is you can absolutely go it alone. Probably my least favorite, if I'm honest, of the options, because actually what the SRA did with the SQE is remove a lot of that responsibility from a training organisation. In fact, remove all of the responsibility from an organisation to oversee and to monitor and to manage you during that qualification process. However, this works really well for some people, certainly, and you can go out, look for those opportunities to get qualifying work experience yourself. You may already have got a lot of it, as we've said, so that certainly can be a very good option for many people. The third option, you could partner with Accutrainee, which unsurprisingly would be my favourite choice out of the three. But really just working with a partner or a provider that's looking to get you very good quality qualifying work experience opportunities. And from our perspective as well, what we hope to supplement that with is support and guidance, including mentoring and training along the way. So there are different ways of certainly securing QWE. So the next slide, I think, is probably the most poignant of my slides. And certainly for me, I would say if you want to take away anything at all today, please focus very much on this slide. What the SRA has done, certainly with QWE, is, as we've seen with what Giles mentioned about the variety of work that could be classed as qualifying work experience, it has taken away and removed a lot of the, excuse me, one sec, sorry. I did warn Giles and Alice that might happen. Yeah, it's taken away a lot of the regulatory requirements that are needed through that training contract period or QWE period, a lot of the parameters and what's actually needed. The SRA's response to this is, well, look, that's fine, because we're not asking you to confirm someone's competence whilst they're doing work experience. That will be tested in part 2. But I think what I really want to stress is this point about the focus on preparing yourself for qualification. Now, obviously, there are some people out there who will want to qualify as solicitors because it might be a badge they want to get to lead them down a different career path. Absolutely fine. I think the vast majority of people, though, are seeking to become qualified as a solicitor because they want to practice law and they want a career in the profession. And I think that's really where qualifying work experience will become very, very important, because if you have to really focus on what is the end game here, and if the end game is to get a newly qualified position of your dreams, the role that you've always wanted to find yourself in, then what you do before that is going to be very, very important to any future employer. If you take an example, for instance, that there's yourself and one other a peer who's going for the same NQ role as you are, and you have gone it alone and have successfully registered qualifying work experience that all counts, but actually the quality of the work that you did was maybe quite repetitive. It was perhaps quite administrative in nature. You didn't really get much feedback, etc. And you're sitting there in an NQ interview, and compared to somebody else who perhaps has had an awful lot of exposure to different skills and variety of work and feedback and development, you can start to see how the other candidate may be a more of an attractive person for a particular role. And likewise, when we talk about qualifying work experience from, for instance, Citizens Advice Bureau, absolutely fine if on qualification that's the career direction you want to go in. If you want to be a corporate solicitor in a city law firm, doing 2 years of qualifying work experience, obviously at the CAB is unlikely to put you in a strong position to actually secure those NQ positions. So, how do you go about ensuring that you get good quality qualifying work experience? Again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's really important to ask as many questions as you can at the outset. What is the intention of the organisation? Is this is it from their perspective a relationship where they're looking to grow and develop you as well, or actually do they have a small project, maybe a disclosure project that they just need done and they don't really care, they just want the job done? So really good to ask questions on what the role will entail. Really good, as I mentioned again before, confirming up front that they're happy to confirm that this is going to count towards your qualifying work experience, and that they think, from their experience, that this would be a good idea. always ensuring that you're receiving regular feedback so that you can use opportunities to grow and to develop and improve. And of course, looking to see whether you're going to be appraised during the period as well. All are good indicators of an organisation that's actually really interested in your development too. The variety of skills as well, as I mentioned, because QWE can theoretically just be done in a very focused way, from your own perspective in terms of improving your own chances further down your career and increasing your confidence as well as your ability to do the work that you need to do post-qualification, it's really important that you seek out lots of different types of tasks as well that will, obviously improve different skills. And finally, what you very much want to be focusing on is assuming that, and this is particularly if you're in one organisation for a long period of time, is assuming that things are going well and you're demonstrating that your abilities. You want to see that your level of responsibility is steadily increasing as you go through periods of qualifying work experience, because ultimately the purpose of this is to try and prepare you for qualification, so that when you're sort of thrown in at the deep end the day after you've qualified, you feel in your own, for yourself as well and for your own confidence, that you've got a good steer on how to manage a transaction, for example. So I'm just going to move on now to selecting the right partner, the right QWE partner for you. Now, just to be clear here, there's two sort of things we could be talking about here. There's a QWE partner, which is someone like Accutrainee that will support you in finding and identifying good qualifying work experience, confirming that QWE for you and ensuring you're getting the right skills and experiences that you need. And obviously there's also selecting a training provider, an institution that will prepare you for passing SQE Part 1 and 2. And no surprises to hear that I think, CULP is obviously an excellent choice there for any aspiring solicitor. But focusing on QWE partners here, as I mentioned, you may want to go it alone. Do you actually need one? Maybe. If not, if you feel confident you've kind of got a good steer on the type of work you want to get exposure to and you can go out and get that, that's fine. But obviously, if you did decide that a QWE partner was beneficial to you, then I'm just going to run through a couple of the advantages to that. So as I mentioned, from our perspective, certainly we want to ensure that you're getting the right quality of work that's valuable for you and your development. We also want to make sure that that period of work experience is valuable to the clients, because ultimately, from our perspective, we want this to be an opportunity for you to go in and show that client what you're capable of, and for them to provide you, to offer you a job at the end of the process and once you've qualified. There's mentoring as well. Each of our trainees is assigned a mentor. They usually are current or ex-general counsel or current or ex-general city partners, and they meet with their mentees every month to discuss the type of work that's being done, any reflections, learning experiences that you may have had, the skills that you have been acquiring, and generally just to support you in any way they can. I think one of the ways that our mentoring scheme really adds value, as far as what our trainees tell us as well, is that the mentors are always someone that's completely separate from the organisation they're working in. So you can really feel that this is a separate individual who's there to support you, a shoulder when you need it, and an ear, and someone that can give you some really valuable advice on any challenges you might be facing. We want to certainly offer a bespoke program. So certainly up until now, with our periods of recognised training, no two training contracts are really identical. We recognise that everyone has a slightly different journey. We recognise that people, as they're going through this process, may change in preferences of what they're looking for. So we want to certainly keep you very much in the loop and in the discussion of the types of organisations you might want to get experience in, the types of areas of law that you're really interested in, and that making that a very bespoke program for you. Next, we've got cohort there. So certainly if you're going it alone as well, you may find in many instances that you're the only trainee in an organisation, and that can be quite a lonely place. Certainly a lot of our trainees as well can be the only trainee. Often, there's situations where they're working with just a general counsel, and they together form the legal team for an organisation. So fantastic responsibility, really in at the deep end, but actually it can be quite a lonely place. So what we can give our trainees in that instance is the ability to come back to a much larger cohort of trainees working in all sorts of different organisations, law firms, in-house legal teams, and and just network and socialise with them and share stories. And finally, we've got pathways, last but not least, which is, from our perspective, we see this as your online career partner. And we've developed that at Accutrainee using our 10 years of experience of helping trainees qualify. And I'm just going to run through a couple of screenshots, if that's okay, just to give you a flavour of what pathways can provide you. It's worth mentioning at this point, it's an entirely free resource. You don't need to have applied to us. Obviously, we hope you do, but you don't need to have applied to us or be working with us. So it's entirely free, and you get access to it or register onto the platform by going to our website, and on the top there's a drop down with pathways, and you can register that way. And I put a couple of links in at the beginning of the seminar today, just to direct you to that. So when you first join Pathways, our AI bot, Al, very clever wording there, obviously, will ask you a series of questions, and that will go on to generating your own sort of personal career path, your own personal qualification pathway, I guess, because obviously this will also work for people who want to do the traditional training contract, all sorts of different routes. And in addition to that pathway, you can see, I don't know if you can see because I'm sorry, the wording is so small, but there are functions there that allow you, for instance, to keep all of your qualification documents all in one place. That can be very handy when you're coming to looking for jobs, because it's right there and available for you. The key to it is the qualifying work experience portfolio, where you can record the types of experience that you're getting, and that will help steer you in terms of things that you might need to, experiences you might need to get more of, or areas that you feel that you've had quite a lot of experience in. There's a learning and development section which covers some access to courses, some discounts to courses, some advice and guidance on some of the core competencies. And there are also other areas around mentoring, but the way Pathways functions is that essentially the more you work with us, the more functionality kind of becomes available to you. So the mentoring is actually for those individuals that do work with us. If you could go on to the next slide, please, Alice, that would be great. So yeah, you can see there that some of the competency plus guidance notes that we've got, and on the right hand there, it's just an indication of an entry that you would put into your portfolio, which covers, an explanation of the tasks that you've done and reflections that you've had, but very crucially as well, aligning what you've done against the statement of solicitor's competence and the requirements there, to put together a very detailed portfolio for yourself. So that's a very, very quick whistle-stop sort of tour of Pathways, but I hope that you feel it's beneficial to you if you choose to use it. And as I said, it's an entirely free resource. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. We don't have any questions at the moment specifically around the details you've been speaking about, but as I said, please do add any questions in as they come to you. So we're just going to look a little more at the college's preparation courses now.
Thank you, and thank you very much indeed, Susan, for that. So Alice, if we just move on, let's look at first of all at some headlines around the courses. I think the key thing for me is understanding, and it's rather as Susan was saying about your pathway into QWE, it's this idea of having something that supports you, and we support you in terms of the SQE examinations. We've designed all the materials for virtual study. It's a very flexible course that we offer, so effectively we work a lot with those who are currently completing or starting their qualifying work experience and want to study and earn while they learn. And I suppose the root of our model, rather like Susan was saying about Accutrainee, is we really like to work with individually. So we have a one-to-one practitioner supervision model. We supply all the materials you need for our courses. We've supplied them online, but also supply hard copy materials for our manuals, because that's what our students have said they wanted. And I suppose what we've aimed to do is provide a very flexible model to meet your work-life demands. You'll see on the right-hand side, I've put the various lengths of time that you could study for SQE1 and SQE2. We have a full-time module, effectively 13 weeks for SQE1 and 10 weeks for SQE2. But then we realised a lot of people want to study this part-time. So on our part-time course for 20 weeks, we probably study around 15 hours a week. And a lot of people are doing our part-time model, have talked to their employers and are either getting a study day, a formal study day, or simply some time in the week to study. And then we even have 40-week pathways for these programs, where those who are working and aren't on a particular timescale for qualification can actually do about 7 hours study a week over 40 weeks. So it's the variety of modes of delivery we hope helps that flexibility of our virtual model to make it really, really useful for those who are working and balancing their work and life commitments at the same time. I suppose moving on to that, and just I suppose the highlight we found about is this idea of the support that we give you to support you to pass the SQE. So if we move on to the next slide, you see I've just highlighted a few things on there that our students have fed back to us really work for them. It's this one-to-one, this relationship you have with your weekly meetings with your supervisor, and also your weekly meetings with your subject experts. So each of the subjects or skills you'll be covering, you'll actually be also talking every week to a subject expert. We found that's the best way to unlock people's understanding of the various materials they're looking at, whether it's the knowledge in SQE1 or the practice of the skill in SQE2. And practice is absolutely key for our courses. We put you through lots of practice assessments that replicate the SQE1 multiple choice questions or the SQE2 skills assessments. But what we also want to do is make sure that you know you're on track to an accepted standard. In other words, that you're ready to go through and, if you wish to, take the Kaplan exam immediately after the preparation course, because all our preparation courses bump up against the SQE examination dates. And we give you really an SQE ready review where we go through all the data of your activities and your assessments and what you've done, share that with you and talk to you about your level and the level that you're at. And we'll be able to say to you, because we know from our data so far that anyone who passes our internal exam goes on and has a very good chance of passing the Kaplan exam. So we're happy to talk to you about level and whether we think you're ready or not to progress. And if you've had any interruption to your studies, you might decide, for example, at that point, to be able to delay your exam date, your Kaplan exam date, to maybe the next sitting. We have decided that as part of our commitment to access to the profession, we have very much decided to competitively price our products to make it affordable. And also part, and I talk about this in a little while, also part of a wider master's offering those who want to do a legal master's, which means you can also take advantage of the master's loan. The key message we're also getting from our students is, while they want to be supported through the examinations with our materials and our learning methodology, it's also absolutely key that students themselves, the SQE1 and SQE2 exams, there is a real process and learning structure in place. And if you can keep up with that learning process and structure, then you have a really good chance of gaining the confidence and the understanding to pass these assessments. But it's really like a job. So when you're studying on the courses, especially the full-time course, it's treating it as a job in terms of hours of study and engagement. Okay, so moving on to our next slide, I think it's quite helpful to just have a look at which sort of training provider might be for you. And obviously, I'm delighted that we can have a chance to talk to you about our offering, but this offering may not be for you. And therefore, I think there's a general list of things you should be aware of when you're looking at a training provider. Firstly, what's your work-life balance requirement? Are you able to study full-time and perhaps in theory move more quickly through the study stage of this qualification? Or is part-time work really the one for you? And therefore then with part-time, it's worth asking the provider, how many hours am I actually going to be studying? Is it flexible? Have I got the flexibility across the week to study? We provide a calendar for a week within which we let you know you can study whenever you like within that week, as long as you cover this ground and cover these elements of the course in this week. You are on track. When you study and where you study is really up to you. There may be some who are much more fans of face-to-face learning. We are an online provider. We provide, say, lots of one-to-one support like you and I are talking now. We don't provide classroom learning. That may be something, a learning style point that you prefer. I'd also ask your provider, what range of resources do you give me? As I mentioned earlier, we've had feedback that our students want both the online provision through our learning management system Canvas, where everything is, it's our learning community, but also they want manuals. So we provide hard copy manuals to all our students for both SQE1 and SQE2. It's worth asking your training provider what information and what manuals you get, what additional material, and whether you have to pay extra for them, because we've effectively bundled all ours up in one price. So there's no hidden extras. It's all there in the price. I think it's also important the level and style of how you practice for the SQE1 assessment. So in SQE1, looking at the MCQs, making sure they're the right level, but also that you're increasing the amount of MCQs you're doing in a structured way. In other words, you're guided through from week to week the sort of assessment levels you're meant to reach and the time in which you're meant to do the exams. And then SQE2, it's really important about that level of supervision and support for your practice and feedback sessions, because we believe in building the skill gradually with you. We can't expect you to be proficient in the time required for the Kaplan assessment straight away. We need to build that through the course. Some other things that will, of course, be relevant for your choice of provider. Timing of course start dates. We run all our courses up against an exam date for Kaplan. So once you've finished our preparation course, you can do that. I suspect most providers would do that as well. You've got to look at fees and associated costs. Remember, there are the fees that you pay a provider, but there's also that separate exam fee for both SQE1 and SQE2 that you pay to Kaplan directly. And when you sign up for the exams, you sign up directly with Kaplan. It's not via any provider. And finally, you may look at your provider and say, actually, I want some wider training. I want to do my SQE, but I also want to train myself to be a very good trainee lawyer. And therefore, there will be programs that the provider might run in terms of part of a wider LLM. If you're going to do a master's and have that wider skills and also perhaps some electives modules in transactions that they do in law firms or organizations that you're hoping to join, then you might also be wanting to look at the master's loan, which is available for master's study, around £11,000 available, and whether that will cover your costs for studying all part of the master's. With our master's, we've positioned it so it will cover your costs and the Kaplan fees as well. That's so finally, suppose, a little bit of wraparound consideration that if you are thinking about qualifying work experience, you're probably thinking at some point about the examination. These are some elements to bring into your conversation with a potential provider to check that you're getting the right learning model for you. That's absolutely key. On the next slide, we've just presented you with some examination dates, and that's really just to put you in mind that when you're planning your next stage in terms of qualified work experience, or also in terms of the exams, there are specific exam dates that you have to hit, and therefore courses you're looking at will probably be predicated on the basis of running into one of those examinations. Okay, so that's enough from me for now. Alice, I think we're happy to take any questions that there are.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Giles. I've just got a couple of questions that actually were submitted for people registering. So I'll ask you those. They're okay. I think they're more about the SQE than QWE. As the pass rate in 2021 for SQE1 was 53%, what happens if you fail and if a firm is sponsoring you? Will they finance a resitting?
I think that's a great question. And I think just as Susan referred to, look, when you join for qualifying work experience purposes, have a detailed conversation. It's actually very important with the firm, if they're sponsoring you, to have that conversation at the beginning. You're not saying you will fail, but I think if you're joining a firm who are going to put you through the SQE, you should be aware of what the consequences might be. For example, if you fail FLK paper 1 or paper 2. So I would always have that conversation first. To answer the question directly, it really depends on the firm's policy, which is why it's worthwhile finding out before you come to take the examinations. A lot of firms are saying to us they understand the new examination is completely different from what anyone's done, for example, in their degree subjects or elsewhere, or indeed have studied in their studies. So the SQE1 exam is a significant hurdle in terms of the learning methodology for the assessment. So firms are understanding of that. I think what firms would want to do is probably have a conversation with you about how you approach the examination and whether they have sufficient confidence then to pay for a second attempt, which would effectively be the examination fees and maybe some more preparation fees. We actually, as a provider, offer those students who don't pass first time with us a chance to stay with us and use our materials to have a second go at the exams free effectively, but you would still have to pay an exam fee again for your attempt. So I think that conversation with the firm at the very early stage is very important, because they will have a set policy or be deciding on a set policy as to what they do. It really depends, I suspect, on your individual circumstances.
Thank you. Susan, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
No, I completely agree. I think it's very much down to each firm's policy that they set for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. So the last question I have at the moment is, what grade do you have to qualify for the SQE?
Now, there is no requirement for a grade qualification for the SQE. It's a good question, because under the old LPC, you would often have both the SRA, particularly the bar under the old bar course, would recommend to providers and say that someone had to have a minimum, say, of a 2-2. But that's all gone. So for the SQE, those 4 requirements I highlighted at the beginning are the 4 elements you need. They're not grade dependent. So you have a degree or equivalent experience, you are satisfied the requirements for suitability, you are actually do get your 2 years qualifying work experience, and you pass those exams, SQE and SQE2, that prepare you for entry to the profession. There's no link to any grade requirement. And that was one of the things the SRA were looking at, is trying to open access and not have it narrowed down by a particular funnel of requirements. It's meeting those individual elements and obtaining those that will get you qualified, rather than any particular grade at the outset that predicates whether you can enter the process or not.
Thank you. Just give it a moment or two in case anyone else would like to add any questions. I've posted various links in the chat for people, but we'll also send them around later with the slides. So you've got the Pathways link, the training template, and the QWE hub. Right, well, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to share a couple of last slides. We have an event that you might be interested in running next week. It's about accessibility into law for Black lawyers. Isaac and Mab have got some really interesting experiences, and very much not all positive about their experiences as Black junior lawyers and trainees. And it's really important, I think, for all of us to hear those and hear their perspectives. So please join us next week at that event if you can, and I'll pop the registration link in the chat. And here are our contact details. Again, we'll pop them over after this event. We have an open evening on the 3rd of November, which you'd be very welcome to join us if you'd like to hear more about our preparation courses. And we also have a SQE study and information group on LinkedIn, where you can just receive lots of different information and also connect with all sorts of people in terms of those taking the SQE, thinking about taking the SQE, and some of our students who've passed the SQE. But that, I think, is everything from us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Susan.
very much.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, hope to see you soon.
Bye now.